1. I am forced into speech because men of science have refused to follow my advice without knowing why. It is altogether against my will that I tell my reasons for opposing this contemplated invasion of the Antarctic, with its vast fossil hunt and its wholesale boring and melting of the ancient ice cap. And I am more reluctant because my warning may be in vain. Doubt of the real facts, as I must reveal them, is inevitable. Yet, if I suppressed what will be seen extravagant and incredible, there will be nothing left. Hitherto withheld photographs, both ordinary and aerial, will count in my favor, for they are damnably vivid and graphic. Still, they will be doubted because of the great lengths to which great clever fakery can be carried. The ink drawings, of course, will be jeered at as obvious impostures, notwithstanding a strangeness of technique which art experts ought to remark and puzzle over. In the end, I must rely on the judgment and standing of the few scientific leaders who have, on the one hand, sufficient independence of thought to weigh my data on its own hideously convincing merits, or in the light of certain primordial and highly baffling myth cycles, and on the other hand, sufficient influence to deter the exploring world in general from any rash and over-ambitious program in the region of those mountains of madness. It is an unfortunate fact that relatively obscure men like myself and my associates, connected only with a small university, have little chance of making an impression where matters of a wildly bizarre or highly controversial nature are concerned. It is further against us that we are not, in the strictest sense, specialists in the fields which came primarily to be concerned. As a geologist, my object in leading the Miskatonic University expedition was wholly that of securing a deep-level specimen of rock and soil from various parts of the Antarctic continent, aided by the remarkable drill devised by Professor Frank H. Pabody of our engineering department. I had no wish to be a pioneer in any other field than this, but I did hope that the use of this new mechanical appliance at different points along previously unexplored paths would bring to light materials of a sort of hitherto unreached by the ordinary methods of collection. Pabody's drilling apparatus, as the public already knows from our reports, was unique and radical in its lightness, portability, and capacity, combined the ordinary artisan drill principles with the principle of the small circular rock drill in such a way as to cope quickly with strata and of varying hardness. Steelhead jointed rods, gasoline motor, collapsible wooden derrick, dynamiting paraphernalia, cording, rubbish removal auger, and sectional pipings for bores 5 inches wide and up to 100,000 feet deep, all formed with needed accessories, no greater load than that 3 7-dog sledges could carry. This being made possible by the clever aluminum alloy, of which most of the metal objects were fashioned, 4 large Dornier airplanes, designed especially for the tremendous altitude flying necessary on the Antarctic plateau, and with added fuel warming and quick starting devices worked out by Pabody, could transport the entire expedition from a base at the edge of the Great Ice Barrier to various suitable inland points And from these points, a sufficient quota of dogs would serve us. We plan to cover as great an area as one Antarctic season, or longer if we absolutely necessary, would permit, operating mostly in the mountain ranges and on the plateau south of the Ross Sea, regions explored in varying degree by Shackleton, Amundsen, Scott, and Byrd. With frequent changes in camp made by airplane and involving distances of great enough to be of geological significance, we expected to unearth a quite unprecedented amount of material, especially in the pre-Cambrian strata, of which so narrow a range of Antarctic specimens had previously been secured. We wish also to obtain as great as possible a variety of the upper fossiliferous rocks, since the primal history of this bleak realm of ice and death is of highest importance to our knowledge of the Earth's past. That the Antarctic continent was once temperate and even tropical, with the teeming vegetable and animal life of the lichens, marine fauna, arachnida, and penguins of the northern edge are the only survivals. It is a matter of common information, and we hope to expand that information in variety, accuracy, and detail. When a simple boring reveals phosphoriferous signs, we should enlarge the aperture by blasting in order to get specimens of suitable size and condition. Our borings of varying depth, according to the promise held out by the upper soil of rock, were to be confined or to composed or nearly exposed land surfaces. These inevitably being slopes or bridges because of the 1 or 2 mile thickness of solid ice overlying the lower levels. We cannot afford to waste drilling depth with any considerable amount of mere glaciation, though Peabody had worked out a plan for sinking copper electrodes in thick clusters of boring and melting off limited areas of ice with current from a gasoline-driven dynamo. It is this plan, which we could not put into effect except experimentally on an expedition such as ours, that the coming Starkweather Moore expedition proposes to follow, despite the warnings I've issued since our return from the Antarctic. The public knows of the Miskatonic expedition through our frequent wireless reports to the Arkham Advertiser, and Associated Press, and through the latter articles of Peabody and myself. We consisted of 4 men from the university: Peabody, Lake of Biology Department; Atwood of the Physics Department, also meteorologist; and I, representing geology and having nominal command, besides 16 assistants, 7 graduate students from Miskatonic, and 9 skilled mechanics. Of these 16, 12 were qualified airplane pilots, all but 2 of whom were competent wireless operators. 8 of them understood navigation with compass and sextant, as did Peabody, Atwood, and I. In addition, of course, our 2 ships, or wooden X-whalers, reinforced for ice conditions and having auxiliary steam, were fully manned. The Nathaniel Derby Peckman Foundation, aided by a few special contributions, financed the expedition. Hence, our preparations were extremely thorough despite the absence of great publicity. The dogs, sledges, machines, camp materials, and unassembled parts of our 5 planes were delivered in Boston, and there our ships were loaded. We were marvelously well equipped for our specific purposes, and in all matters pertaining to supplies, regimen, transportation, and camp construction, we were profited by the excellent example of our many recent and exceptionally brilliant predecessors. It was the usual number and fame. It was the unusual number and fame of these predecessors which made our own expedition, ample though it was, so little noticed by the world at large. As the newspapers told, we sailed from Boston Harbor on September 2nd, 1930, taking a leisurely course down the coast and through the Panama Canal and stopping at Samoa and Hobart, Tasmania, as which latter place we took on final supplies. None of our exploring party had ever been in the polar regions before, hence we all relied greatly on our ship captains. J.B. Douglas, commanding the brig Arkham, and serving as commander of the sea party, and George Thorfinton, commanding the bark Miskatonic. Both veteran whalers in Antarctic waters. As we left the inhabited world behind, the sun sank lower and lower in the north and stayed longer and longer over the horizon each day. At about 62 degrees south latitude, we sighted our first icebergs, table-like objects with vertical sides. And just before reaching the Antarctic Circle, which we crossed on October 20th, with appropriately quaint ceremonies, we were considerably troubled with field ice. The falling temperature, which bothers me considerably after our long voyage through the tropics. But I tried to brace up for the worst rigors to come. On our many occasions, the curious atmospheric effects enchanted me vastly. These including a strikingly vivid mirage, the first I had ever seen, in which distant bergs became the battlements of unimaginable cosmic castles. Pushing through the ice, which was fortunately neither extensive nor thickly packed, we regained open water at south latitude 67 degrees, east longitude 175 degrees. On the morning of October 26th, a strong quote-unquote land blink appeared on the south, and before noon we all felt a thrill of excitement at beholding a vast, lofty and snow-clad mountain chain which opened out and covered a whole vista ahead. At last we had encountered an outpost of the great unknown continent and its cryptic world of frozen death. These peaks were obviously the Admiralty Range discovered by Ross, and would now be our task to round Cape Adair and sail down the east coast of Victoria Land to our contemplated base on the shore of McMurdo Sound at the foot of the volcano Erebus in south latitude 77 degrees. By 9. The first lap of the voyage was vivid and fancy-stirring, great barren peaks of mystery looming constantly against the west as the low northern moon of sun of noon, or the still lowering horizon grazing southern sun of midnight poured its hazy reddish rays over the white snow, bluish ice and water lanes, and black bits of exposed granite slope. Through the desolate summits swept raging intermittent gusts of the terrible Antarctic wind, whose cadences sometimes held vague suggestions of a wild and half-sentient musical piping, with notes extending over a wide range, and which some subconscious mnemonic reason seemed to me disquieting and even dimly terrible. Something about the scene reminded me of the strange and disturbing ancient paintings of Nicholas Roerich, and of the still stranger and more disturbing descriptions of the evilly fabled plateau of Leng, which occurred in the dreaded Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abzul al-Hazred. I was rather sorry later on that I ever looked into that monstrous book at the college library.